charges, but weren't able to kind of bump those charges up and get the additional penalties that were associated with running a criminal enterprise. And so good on them, right? Don't talk to the cops. You know that. That's the rule. Don't talk to the cops. Just don't talk to the cops. And they maintained the code of silence, and they all ended up going to jail, or many of them ended up going to jail, but they didn't go to jail for 100 years like they would have if somebody had started talking.
Yeah, and they could establish the enterprise existing.
As soon as you can do that, man, those penalties jump up dramatically. So, and we'll talk more about RICO in this episode, actually, very, very soon here, and talk about why RICO is utilized. And then another interesting thing. So from 2011 to 2016, Obama issued a bunch of pardons and commuted sentences. And in those, there were 3 people who were offenders in the Cornbread Mafia who were either pardoned or had received significantly commuted sentences based on their convictions for growing and selling pot. So I thought that was interesting.
I think it's interesting that they have, like, because they were active from the 80s until the early 90s.
80s, yeah, it looks like from the late 70s to the early 90s, yeah.
And they're called the Cornbread Mafia because the Cornbread Mafia sounds like something, it would be like a hillbilly like during Prohibition or something like that. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that they aren't called something pot related, right? It's cornbread instead. Yeah. But it originated in Kentucky, but kind of was across like multiple states, like Minnesota and Missouri and Illinois and Indiana and states like that. A bunch of those, 10 different states. Wow. Tennessee, probably. I'm guessing that our friend Hot Rod Dunham is familiar with the Cornbread Mafia.
yeah, as he was ratting him out or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I think that I think that this is sort of what they tried to recreate with Mags Bennett. I'm guessing. If I had researched it a little bit, I probably would have found some ties to Mags Bennett and her empire in Kentucky, and the relationship of that to the Cornbread Mafia. I'm guessing.
I do think it's interesting because this episode takes place during a time where, marijuana is getting decriminalized all over the country.
Yeah.
And it's just funny to me that, like one day, the law goes away and all these people who are probably some are still in jail.
Yeah.
For these crimes. They should be like, if it's like a nonviolent crime, they should be like being set free.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, our respected Attorney General, now Vice President from the state of California, fought to keep those people in jail.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right.
So, yeah.
Oh yeah, and she was the one who was like laughing about like sending people to jail.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like, because there's the prison industrial complex and slave labor and the whole thing. I've been very much radicalized on Crime and Punishment. If you haven't seen my views evolve over the last 3 years, I've been radicalized.
I like to think that I played a part in that.
some small part, I would say. Yes, absolutely. So that's the Cornbread Mafia. I thought that was an interesting story to hear about. It ties nicely into to season 6 here. But that gets us through the trip back. So let's get to the episode. So we open up with Boyd and Ava having drank the bottle to the corners, as Boyd says. They're 3 sheets to the wind, lying on the bar, and Ava gets called to work to open, except it's really actually Raylan, because he needs a meeting. And when she arrives, she's completely in the bag. When she arrives, she's driving her car drunk, really like incapacitated drunk. She's driving, and she can't even get out of the car. She has to get out she tries to get out the passenger side and falls down. It's quite the little entertaining pratfall moment. But Raylan has some bad news for her, because when she shows up, AUSA Vasquez, who Raylan later calls AUSA Napoleon, and I really enjoyed that. is there. Oh, you know what? There's something I did want to point out about Boyd's conversation with Ava when they were drunk at the bar. She was talking about being a cheerleader and about how he talks about how he was never an athlete. And he mentions that having a drug dealer for a daddy made it hard for him to get to practice on time. And the question that I wrote is, well, what about Bowman? Bowman had a drug dealer for a daddy too, and he was a football star who was going to go, to the NFL before he got hurt.
That's a good question.
It turns out it's not so much your daddy, Boyd, it's you.
Yeah.
Boyd always blaming someone else for his problems, right?
But Boyd, like Tony Soprano, didn't have the makings of a varsity athlete.
You never had the makings of a varsity athlete.
Yep.
So Ava finds out, much to her chagrin, that both Rachel and Vasquez are there to have a conversation with her about why they haven't gotten any information from her yet. I've got a few points on this that we'll get to, but I have a clip that I want to play first.
And this is a writ. It is outlining the terms of your confidential informant arrangement with the U.S. Attorney's Office, where you stipulate that you will obtain and relay relevant information that may lead to charges against Boyd Crowder.
I know what all it says. I haven't forgotten what our arrangement is.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that, because up until now, I'm having a really hard time seeing how you're holding up to your side of the bargain.
It's kind of been a dry well, Miss Crowder. You need to give us something makes us lean forward. Otherwise, what are we doing?
I told you I am working on it.
And we heard you. Our point is
that you could throw a stone into any one of these shit-pack hollers and hit some random hillbilly with more information than you've been able to dredge up so far.
I just need time. I've barely been out a couple of weeks. How am I
Weeks is the relevant word in that sentence, Ms. Crowder. It has been weeks without any useful information from you. Weeks with crimes that are happening that we know little to nothing about.
Vasquez. She gets the picture.
Does she?
Look at her. You don't think you're making an impression?
Miss Crowder, I understand you're feeling under the weather, and I understand you're feeling a little picked on. But you need to understand, if you don't bring us something relevant and tangible within the week, your time as a CI is done. You'll be remanded back to prison to serve out your sentence.
Or die trying. Right? You come all the way to Harlan to threaten me. Could have made a phone call, save yourself a trip.
Ava?
No, Raylan. I understand. You ain't getting your way fast enough suits you. So, you bring these two assholes up here to impress upon me the severity of my situation. Well, consider myself impressed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to throw up.
Look, she's doing a fantastic job playing a drunk, right? It's one of the hardest things you can do as an actor is to convincingly play drunk, and she's doing really well. She really played up the accent, which is absolutely something that happens to people when they have an accent and they're drunk. It comes out more. It becomes more pronounced. It was well done on Joelle Carter's part here to play Ava in this situation, I think.
I think this is probably one of the only openings that they've had where it ended like on a line like that. Like it's a kind of a ha-ha line, like, well, excuse me now while I go throw up. And then he's all, like it just goes into the intro.
There's been a couple sort of cold opens that have had, moments like that. I think of the one in season 1 where the guy breaks out of prison and Raylan's at the gas station and he takes his hat and locks him in the freezer or whatever, and Raylan goes, well, shit, right? That's right. That's one. And but you're absolutely right. It's other shows kind of go for, we're going to hit that laugh line really hard right before we go to the credits, because that's what we do in our cold opens. But this show doesn't do that too often. Usually they're looking for a more dramatic moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, they're there intimidating her for not getting the information. And there's a few things that I want to talk about here. One of them's RICO, and we'll get to that in a second. But the first thing I want to talk about is as our good buddy Mike, the attorney, points out to us on our email. That's groundlesspodcast@gmail.com. As he was sort of watching ahead, he said, hey, look, Ava hasn't been convicted of anything at this point. She was in jail awaiting trial on charges related to her stabbing the guard. Yet Rachel says you'll be, or Vasquez says you'll be remanded to prison to finish out the rest of your sentence. And she hasn't been sentenced to anything. It's like what are they going to put her back in jail for? And this is, again, kind of the inconsistency that we've pointed out throughout this season, where it's like, okay, wait a minute. Why is Ava under the threat of going back to jail if she doesn't cooperate, if the prison guard has rescinded his statement and she was never convicted of anything, and they can't convict her of the dead body charge? And so it's kind of they have to have some level of authority or power over her in order to get her to cooperate. So they had to do this, right?
Yeah. Is there any other way that they could have forced her into?
No, I don't think so. I mean, potentially as part of this, they could have gotten her to sign something that said that she committed the crime. Maybe that was the deal. Maybe her agreement says that, maybe it required her to plead guilty to the body issue in exchange for getting out, right? And it's like she signs a confession that says that she did what they accused her of doing, and in exchange she's allowed, or they'll defer her prosecution, and if she assists them, they'll choose to not prosecute her, something like that. And Ava was so desperate to get out of the can at that point that maybe it's possible that that's what was going on. Although if her lawyer was involved, he never would have let her sign that. So yeah, I don't know, but Mike makes a great point, and it's one that I've been wondering about too. So, but again, it's a pretty big continuity error here for him to say finish out the rest of your sentence. That's not, she hasn't been sentenced to anything at this point.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, so she's basically had been held pending trial, right?
Yeah,
is that
exactly.
What that is?
Yeah, they'd made it so that she couldn't get bail, and then she assaulted a prison guard while she was in jail. So they're not going to let you out after you do that for sure. So you're gonna stay in jail awaiting trial. So
yeah.
But I mentioned that we're going to talk about RICO a little bit, and so I figured it'd be a good time to have a legal minute.
Say hello to Miguel Sanchez.
What we call a law bomb.
That's a low blow, Loblaw. A blah, 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 law bomb.
That's what I want to settle. I'm not super prepared.
Oh, sure, like lawyers work in big skyscrapers and have secretaries. Look at him, he's wearing a belt. That's Hollywood for you.
I move for a bad court thingy.
You mean a mistrial?
Yeah, that's why you're the judge and I'm the law-talking guy.
The lawyer.
Right.
I object.
As the resident law talking guy, I'm going to talk about the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act a little bit. So that's what RICO stands for, RICO, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations. It's designed to attack organized crime. And it was signed into law by Nixon in 1970. Presumably, I didn't quite go back this far to sort of find its origination, but I assume Bobby Kennedy was a big fan, given how aggressively he went after certain elements of organized crime, the ones that weren't directly involved with his father, at least. And so signed into law by Nixon in 1970. And basically the way RICO works is it's constructed off of what are called RICO predicates. In order to qualify for prosecution under RICO, you have to have at least 2 acts of racketeering activity, they call it, which are what they call the RICO predicates. And these can include things like gambling, murder, kidnapping, extortion, bribery, arson. What I thought was interesting is distribution of obscenity, distribution of obscene material. So if you were distributing pornography in an illegal way, that would get you potentially flagged for prosecution under RICO too. Prior to pornography's ubiquity on the internet or in convenience stores, even, back in the 90s, it was a lot harder to get your hands on, and a lot of states had very strict laws against those sorts of things.